Hey everyone, welcome back to Rhythm Railroad. If you've been watching my videos lately, you know that I'm currently working on this classification yard, which is basically this entire section that I'm panning over. The issue that I'm having with the yard is that in order to maximize the track length for, arrival departure track especially, I had to really reach in there for the connection point to the main line. So as you can see, the double main line is the one with the cork roadbed under it, and then the yard actually starts right where that double slip switch is. And I don't know if you can tell, but the bench work of the peninsula is right where that point is. So obviously you can't go in there with your hand and manually throw it. So I had to develop a way to do it remotely. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the double slip switch along with the other turnouts that are only for the ladder. I'm not bothering with these. And I'm installing, I have installed tortoise machines to control them remotely, whether it's with a switch or with a code or whatever it is. So in order to keep things consistent, what I did is I also added the remote switches to only the double slip switch, which is again where the yard starts, and then the other switches that are only for the ladder. And something like this would not be installed along with a tortoise machine, because this is just for like a spur, whatever industry that's going to be in the future. So this is always going to be thrown no matter what. And if you want to access that, obviously you can just throw it manually. So anyways, the goal here is to be able to control this yard, if you're the yard master, independently from the dispatcher. So the dispatcher only sees the main line and the lower staging, which I might even add a dispatcher job for the staging, both lower and upper. But for right now, the staging and the main line are one thing. And now I want to make the yard here for the yard master a separate panel. Now, if you're wondering why I want to make it a panel, I have multiple reasons. Number one, so you can stand in the middle of the yard, and I'll probably, this will probably be considered the middle of the yard, and control everything on that side of the ladder and everything on the other side of the ladder from a central location. That's number one. Number two is that JMRI allows you to visualize the tracks much easier than a little diagram that's drawn on a piece of paper or some kind of control panel where you have push buttons and red and green lights and things like that, which is a more traditional approach. But most importantly, the reason why I actually decided to do this is because I saw a lot of people fumbling, including myself, with the double slip switches. Because if you know anything about double slip switches, they're complicated looking. So when you look at them, it's it's really easy to get confused as to which way the train will eventually be going. And most of the derailments that have happened on that one and on the one on the opposite side. And what JMRI does is once you create the panel, you could literally see the line that you have chosen just by pressing the screen or touching the screen. So there's no confusion or doubt as to which path you've chosen or which track you've chosen. The other thing about this is that I like I said before, I wanted to have multiple options. So you can also do a push button panel if you want to. So I'll probably do that anyway, a small one, and I'll probably mount it here or even here. But what I'm going to do with the iPad is I'm going to tuck it in here so that you can, when you need it, you can just pull it out and it'll be like a little drawer where you can control it from there. So let me show you what I'm doing in order to make all that work. And before I do that, I just want to just point out that I'm using Digitrax products. And the way the Digitrax system works is that the tortoise machines that control your turnouts are connected to these basically stationary decoders. This is called a DS64, and it allows you, the simplest thing you can do with this is basically control turnout. So the two inputs here that you see, with the exception of the middle screw on each one, allow you to connect 4 separate turnouts. So these 2 screws would be for the first turnout, these 2 for the next, those and those. So 4 separate turnouts, but it also allows you to add a switch accordingly. So there's a common wire that you would connect here, and then you would decide which of the 4 turnouts you want to, control with a push button, and that other wire of the push button would go into the correct screw according to the number that you're trying to control here. So it basically starts with the second screw, and I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to zoom in, but sometimes it's hard to read. It's the ones with the S, which I believe stand for signal. But S1 would control the first turnout, S2, the second, 3, and 4. And then for the actual turnouts, you would connect them to the R and the G. So turnout number 1 would go to the R and G. It doesn't matter which way you wire it. But if you choose to flip it because it's backwards from your controller, as far as closed and thrown, you could just flip the wires right there. So this would be the second turnout, 2R and 2G, and so on and so forth. And obviously the P in the middle for the power plus, you don't use in this particular situation. Now these DS64s can be used for several other things, but I'm not using it for those things. Basically, that is what's being hooked up to JMRI, so that JMRI can see some kind of address for each turnout. So if you take a look here, these turnouts are already all wired up to one of these. So that address 784, 783, 782, 781 are the ones that I'm physically assigning to JMRI on those turnouts when you see it on the panel, so that it can understand which one to throw at a certain point. So when you click on the screen on JMRI is basically punching in that code automatically and allowing the DS64 to change it. And that kind of reminds me, you can also use your throttle to switch these turnouts by entering the switch. So on a traditional, throttle, you would hit the switch button and then go ahead and put that number in. But here, what you do is this is a single throttle. So if you're in single throttle mode, what you do is you pan to the right. That's what it is. So these are your functions, and if you pan up and down, you get the different functions. But if you go to the main one and you pan to the right, this is where you get your turnout addresses. So you see it says LT, that's for LocoNet turnout. So let's say I want to switch 783. All I got to do is punch that number in, 783. And right now it's closed, so if I want to throw it, I hit T, and it changes this. Same thing if I hit closed. So that's basically the situation for every one of these addresses. So that gives you one more option to control the turnouts here. So let's say you're not near this thing and you want to just do it quickly, and you don't want to go over to the push button and whatever. You could also just punch it into your throttle and get it like that. The last video I put up, which I took it down because it failed on me, but that's how you learn. But the last video I put up, I used these magnetic switches called reed switches that are really, really tiny, and I placed them near, like right on top of the track here, so you could just take a magnet and that would act the same as a push button. But what ended up happening is when I tested it with locomotives that I thought would have a lot of magnetic pull because they had a big speaker in them, and it was a short wheelbase, and you know, I figured there would be a lot of magnetic pull within two of those locomotives actually that I pushed through here. But nothing happened. It was working perfectly. Last night, I pulled in some SD90s, some monster locomotives that I have, and the minute I got through the first motor, it flipped it. So that's a failed solution to doing that. So I'm gonna use those reed switches for something else, but obviously not this kind of thing. So ignore that video if you saw it, and if you are planning on doing that, or you know, installing that on your layout, don't. It doesn't work. All right, so I'm gonna take you over to JMRI and show you what I'm doing there. All right, so here we are at my, this is my control panel, where I have everything I need to basically control everything on the layout remotely. But what the dispatcher panel is just a top screen here. So if you have a dispatcher, that's all they're seeing. And it's basically the lower staging, which I discussed before. And then you have the CP line, which is your main line that goes like this. And then there's a return loop here that comes back down again, just like that. Or you have access to the second railroad, which is the CP goes into the CSX double main. And the CSX double main is just these two tracks that do a loop. And then obviously the Selkirk yard is the one I'm telling you about right now. That's the classification yard. But that is just a reference point. Those tracks are not being detected, and you're not able to switch any turnouts from there for the dispatcher. What I did is I added a second panel, which I put down here for now, which acts the same way as what you see on top. It's just a second panel. You can have as many panels as you want for the same exact layout. But this just concentrates on the yard itself. So you can see the main lines are coming through here, that's CSX. And the connection points are dashed because that's for the dispatcher to decide on. There's going to be a signal there, and the dispatcher is going to give permission to enter the yard. But once you get into the double slip right here and the double slip right there, now you're in within yard limits. So I wanted to show you this because this is what is going to make the yard master's job much simpler. And like I said, especially the double slip switch right here. Now this one I haven't wired up yet, so that's why you see it with nothing in between, but this one is working. So what I want you to notice is that when there's a double slip switch that's set up this way, you can see exactly where the train's going. So this means that this track right here is going to go right into the main line right there. And all I got to do to, let's say, go from the arrival departure track, which is this one up here, to the main line, is just click here, and it switches it over. I don't know if you heard the tortoise machine moving, but now it's so easy to see this, which is not necessarily the case when you're hovering over the actual turnout and you're looking down at the tracks. You're trying to figure out where the tracks are actually going. Similarly, if I want to take that arrival departure and go into this locomotive lead right here, all I got to do is click over here somewhere. There you go. And now you're lined up for that track. It's like super clear to see that. And then if I want to shove back into this track, there we go. You can see I just switched it over, and now I'm lined up for that track on the ladder. So it's going to be the same case on this side. I've also gone ahead and added the addresses that are already programmed. So so in case you want to do it by address, you can just tap that in. And so the last part of this is that in order for me to transfer this panel specifically, just this one panel, over to that iPad that I'm hooking up over there, I have to start something called a web server. Now the way you do that is you go to Tools on your main Panel Pro screen, and you go right here where it says Start JMRI web server. Click on that, and it basically just launches a web server that can be picked up as long as you're hooked up to my what do you call it? Network, like internet network. Okay, so now that that's all done, let's go over to the iPad and I'll show you how that's accessed. So here's the iPad I'm going to be using. So now all you got to do is go into, once you're hooked up to the network that I just set up over there on Wi-Fi, then all you got to do is start your Y throttle, and you're going to see that you have the option of choosing the network that that you're using. So this is the one I'm using, and it automatically sets up this little screen down here that says web server. Okay, so this is obviously a regular, it's a double throttle. iPads automatically do this. They give you 2 throttles. But if you hit web server, it takes you into the actual website that has both my panels. So all I got to do now is choose the panel for the yard, and obviously I'm going to center it, and I'm going to bring it to size. So if I want to see the whole panel, I could do that. And then, if I want to see a specific area, like for example, the double slip switch right there, I could just zoom in, which is nice because when you're using your finger, sometimes you need to make it bigger so that you don't hit something else. But you can see that, for example, I'm just going to bring this iPad over. That same switch that we were talking about over here, number 783, that's being reflected here, is showing that it's closed. Well, actually, in fact, all of these are showing closed. So you can see that's accurate. But if I throw them just by tapping on them, so 781, I'm going to just click on it. So now if I'm the yard master, that's going to be a lot easier than, entering a code or coming over and manually throwing it or whatever it is. Not that I have a problem with that, but it's just, it's more consistent because now you can control both sides. And you can see now that all of them, 784 is thrown, 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 and then eventually that double slip switch will be hooked up to a decoder. So, that's going to make things a lot easier when I go to, switch and drill trains, especially if I have the yard master job. The double slip switch now, like I showed you on the computer, like let's say I want that arrival departure track to go into the lead, all I got to do is tap there. And if I want that arrival departure track to go into the, let's say the main line, I just got to do is tap here. And you could hear them clicking over. So it's so much easier, and it's really clear. So this will live basically in here, and I'll have it plugged in so it never runs out of batteries. And basically, if you need access, it will just come out. I might even do it so that it comes up and then angle somehow. I'll figure it out. Or maybe through the wood here, because this is all hollow in there anyway, so I think I could fit it in there. But the point is that, it'll be very, very easily visible from the center of the yard. As you can see, you can look both ways and you can see what you're doing, and you can visualize it much easier here than having to go over the actual physical turnouts and figure out where the track is pointing. So that's the plan, and it looks like it's working so far. All I got to do is just add the last 2 decoders or decoder inputs there, and then I have the 2 for the double slip switch. So that's it. All right, that's how you do that.